Hi, and welcome to week 6 of ELIS 2601, Childhood Development, Learning, and the Arts. So this is our final week in the class, and you may notice if you're looking at the assignments on Blackboard that there are a few conspicuous things missing, and even in the title screen you may have caught that you don't have a make activity this week. And that's intentional. Our week is a little shorter than average because the end of the week marks our final date together. And typically, I have been allowing you Saturdays and Sundays to continue your submission for portions of the assignments, such as the discussion board and your main graded assignment for the week. That's going to be a little different this week, and we'll talk more about that as I progress in the video. But again, if you're looking at what we have available on Blackboard, you have a little bit less this week. So congratulations, you have a little less to read, and you have and then your discussion board is pulling from both readings and your personal experience, and your assignment will be your culminating experience for thinking through drama. So again, to recap, we've talked about the importance of music and dance early in our class together. And then we spent a couple of weeks thinking about visual art, design, and architecture, and in the middle of our sessions together. And then these last 2 weeks focused primarily on drama or performative learning. And so last week we talked about the importance of structured, imaginative play. And this week we'll be talking about the importance of learning through emotion. So in your readings this week, you'll see some connections and a lot of relationships between what we talked about last week. But ultimately, this is sort of culminating our different areas of arts integration. So we've covered all major areas of arts integration. We've also covered through the accumulation of this course, different discussions of cognitive development, physical development, and social and emotional development. We've touched on all the foundational learning theory as we think about childhood development. We've also talked about post-developmental theory, and we have talked about different domains of learning. And our final week, we're focusing primarily on the relationship of the cognitive and affective domains. And that was evident in our reading and study last week, but that is at the forefront of what we're doing this week. So your first reading is the sequel to the chapter that you read last week. That reading is on social and emotional development, and this is focusing on school-age children, where our reading last week was focused on very young children. This week, we're focused on elementary age children's social and emotional development. And so chapter 12 is going to talk a lot about the importance of friendships and the process of formation of friendships for school-age children in terms of social and emotional development. It also talks about relationships broadly and what is important in those relationships and how children form positive relationships. There is also a section that focuses on the importance of self-understanding. Clearly, philosophically, you have to know yourself before you know other people. But also from a developmental standpoint, it's important that we find ways to foster elementary age children's process of self-knowledge and self-reflection, to think about their actions and consequences, to think about who they want to present themselves to be, and to think ultimately about things like pro-social behavior. Now, pro-social behavior may seem vague or ambiguous. You may have heard the term before, but let's just assume you've never heard the term pro-social behavior before. Pro-social behavior can be easily understood by what it is not. When somebody says, that guy is extremely rude, he interrupts everyone, he has no thought or concern for other people's feelings, and he just generally is totally unaware of his surroundings. He is so antisocial. So pro-social behavior clearly is behavior that is not that, right? So antisocial behavior is working against the good of other people. It may be selfish behavior, or it may be unaware behavior. Antisocial behavior is behavior that is in opposition to group norms, or is disruptive or destructive to group interaction. Pro-social behavior, on the other hand, is when we are working together with students and our school community and our greater community to think about ways that we can help students be connected and help students understand concepts like empathy. And so that's critical in the school setting, and of course it's critical at home. And another portion of this chapter is a discussion of families. And I think this chapter does a really nice job of talking about families broadly and complexly. Of course, we could take an entire semester to discuss families and the role of families in learning, and the way that each of these learning theories that we learned at the beginning of the semester can be looped back into how we think about families. But unfortunately, we don't have that much time. So in the time that we do have, I think that the way that families are talked about here complexly, and the way that families are discussed in terms of their relationship to the school and the importance that they play in elementary age students' learning is handled very well. And there's some great illustrations throughout there as well. And then, of course, the chapter kind of ends in talking about antisocial behavior. So as a footnote to what I've already said, the chapter really kind of outlines what constitutes antisocial behavior and sort of what's problematic about it. So that's chapter 12 in a nutshell. There may be a couple of points in there I missed, but ultimately the goal here is for you to read and engage with that and understand that on your own. And that brings us to... I'm sorry, my cat is meowing. All right, I think he's off on another adventure. That brings us to our second reading. The second reading is all about learning through emotion, and this is a case study that was conducted in Australia in an early childhood classroom. And this is a long-term study. This study is interesting for a number of different reasons. One of which is the researchers engaged in this study are involved in reflective practice. And so your critical task for this class is to create a reflective visual journal. And your reflective visual journal comes from the long tradition of reflective practice, right? So reflective practice is being engaged in the research in this particular case study. And so these researchers are doing a lot of what you've been doing for the last 6 weeks. So for the last 6 weeks, you've been watching videos from a curated playlist that I created for you, and you've been taking field notes. Remember, I showed you in the demo video where you divide the paper in half and you write information about what you're seeing, and then you go back after you've written what you see and you write additional notes in reflection. So again, it's not just about collecting data, it's also about reflecting on what that data means. So it is taking the raw information and analyzing it. And then you do an additional analytical step in your visual journal. So each of these visual journal submissions should be taking that information, the raw data, and your ideas from sort of what you understand about it in reflection, and you are combining image and text in that space. Now, in this case, the researchers themselves are not creating images. They are creating video, and they are taking extensive field notes. And they're also pulling examples from the young children's experiences. But ultimately, what they're engaged in here is looking at the relationship between the affective and cognitive domain. And they set a really good stage to talk about how we often think about the cognitive domain in isolation. And when we talk about the affective domain, we're just focused on the happy stuff, right? So we don't want to think about emotions with young children if they are troubling. But they use extensive research to support the idea of engaging young children in a range of emotional experiences through structured whole class dramatic play. And so this is not dramatic play in the sense of the last piece where there is some teacher direction, but ultimately it is unscripted. In this particular reading, we're looking at a narrative experience. So this is a structured narrative experience that's created by the researchers, but it is intentionally generative. So the idea here is that the researchers have provided some opportunities for the young children to generate content. So there is already a narrative, and they're filling in the details as they go along. Where with the last reading, there is a lot more freedom of play, intentionally, again, to honor sort of the spirit of play. Here, we're interested in more of a narrative structure. And so in this particular space, what the researchers are trying to do is not only engage emotions of joy or happiness, but also things like concern, frustration, and ultimately empathy. So how do we teach empathy? Well, we teach empathy, in this case, through role playing. And this is not just the students playing a role. In this case, the researchers are suggesting that your positionality as a teacher is teacher in role. So you are actually actively role playing with your students. So you take on a role with the students, and then the entire class is engaged in a dramatic or performative narrative. So we create a story, and each of us has a role in the story, including the teacher. So I think it's a very interesting study. It's a great follow-up to what we read last week, and it sets the stage for what you'll be doing with your discussion and your assignment. So in your discussion board this week, I'm asking you to read your first reading about social and emotional development, and I want you to pull a quote from that you find significant in terms of social and emotional development that connects with your experience. So we're at that point in the class together that I'm asking you to dig deep into your previous experiences. I want you to reflect on a whole group learning experience that you had in your elementary school days that had a significant long-term impact on who you are. Now, this could be a positive impact or it could be a negative impact, but it had some kind of lasting impact on you. And this has to be something that the entire class was involved in. So it could be a field trip, it could be a guest speaker, it could be a special activity. It could have just been a mundane experience that had a significant impact on you. So maybe it was learning a new lesson. Maybe it was learning your favorite subject matter or your least favorite subject matter. Whatever the case may be, I want you to think about an example of whole class instruction where social and emotional development were taking place for you. Now, you can't know what other people's minds are doing, so I only want you to think about what you were experiencing in that moment. What social and emotional development was happening in that whole group experience? And now I want to challenge you to think a little farther. Was that experience one that engaged dramatic or performative actions, such as a school play or a role-playing experience or an activity where you have to have different specific roles, such as if you're reenacting a historical moment, or if you are taking on different roles in a demonstration in your science class. There's lots of different things that you could have experienced. I don't know what you've experienced. I wasn't there. And that's why you get to tell us. So you're telling me and your classmates what experience you had. Was it dramatic? Was it not dramatic? So was this social and emotional development moment for you involving drama or not involving drama? Either is fine. The likelihood is that a lot of the experiences that we have don't overtly or intentionally involve drama or performance, because unfortunately it's one of the most neglected fine arts areas for arts integration. Although hopefully, based on the reading from last week and the reading from this week that talk about the importance of engaging community and particularly the role of performative and dramatic arts in the classroom in terms of sort of understanding community, understanding self, understanding peers, you won't make that same mistake. But we're still talking about you. So for the discussion, maybe you didn't have those experiences. So identify whether your experience was dramatic or not dramatic, and then I want you to pull a quote from the second reading. Now, if your experience was dramatic, pull a quote that supports why you feel that the experience that you had positive or negative social and emotional impact on you. And then if the experience was not dramatic, I still want you to pull a quote from the reading. Now, the authors are talking about why drama is important, but they're also talking about why it's neglected, and they're citing different researchers. So even if the experience that you had that had significant social or emotional impact on you for the long term had no dramatic components to it, you can still talk about why that experience connects with that second reading. So again, there's some creative leeway in here, as with any of the discussion boards, that I want you to kind of find the things that resonate with you and connect them to your own experience. And then of course, finally, I'm going to ask you to ask a question of your peers like we have for the last couple of weeks. And this time, I'm asking you to pose a question to your classmates from any of the readings. So if you have any unfinished business, now is your time to answer the questions that haven't been answered before. So if there's anything from any of the readings from any of our 6 weeks together that you are still just perplexed about, that you're still chewing on, and that you're still just like, ugh, I gotta know, what does anybody else think about this? If you haven't addressed that, then you can pull anything from any of the readings. And now all I ask is that you, in your question to your peers, include the title of the reading and give us a quote or give us an idea of the page number that we should reference so that we know where your question's coming from. So if you're asking a question about something from week 2, make sure we know which reading it is and approximately which page we can find the information that you're in question about. So I'm sorry I keep using scare quotes this week. It just feels right because we're talking about drama, and I love to talk with my hands, and this is what I'm doing right now. So, and maybe I'm also doing a little rabbit. All right, so that's it for the discussion board, and that leaves us with the assignment. So your assignment this week, unsurprisingly, based on everything we've talked about so far, your assignment this week is called Acts of Empathy. Now, I don't want you to write 4 full-blown narrative scripts. We don't have time for that. We just have a few last days together. So since time is short, what I want you to do instead is to think through 4 narrative scenarios. Make sure you've read the readings first so you have an idea of what they're talking about in learning through emotion. And I want you to come up with 4 narrative scenarios that are for whole class engagement. And I want those to be kind of transition activities. So I want you to think about these as something happening in between different subject areas. So you're integrating this as its own freestanding dramatic experience that is 15 to 30 minutes long, and it should be happening between 2 things. So you don't have to connect it to other subject matter. It's its own freestanding thing that happens in between spaces. Again, as we're trying to think about how to help encourage pro-social behavior and to build community, sometimes things need to stand on their own. We've talked a lot about arts integration, but sometimes the arts just need to be. We just have arts, and they aren't necessarily compounded or combined or complexified by other subject areas. So in this case, you're doing a transition activity, 15 to 30 minutes long. You're writing 4 summaries. And I want you to pick the one you love. I want you to think about the one that you like. You're ready to teach it now. So I want you to think about that. I want you to describe the narrative in video. Tell us what the narrative scenario is. So for instance, in my narrative scenario, I'm a college professor teaching in a small white cube to a computer screen. And all the computer screens have a different role for the week. Oh wait, that's not really a fiction, is it? That's the actual narrative that I'm living right now. Okay, so I want you to write a fictional narrative scenario. Write a fictional narrative scenario that you have a role in. So who are you as the teacher in this narrative? Who are the students? Are the students all the same, or do they have different designated roles? And what would that, describe the narrative scenario, and then I want you to spend a little bit of time at the end of the video being in character. So I want you to think about who this character is that you've made for yourself. Who are you as a teacher? Who did you become in the narrative for your fiction? And I want you to take on that role and act out what that would be. So you might be an animal, you might be a human that is a different person than who you are. Maybe you are a doctor, or maybe you are a wizard, or maybe you are a helicopter pilot. Whatever the case may be, I want you to take on that role at the end of the video. And then after you've described your favorite narrative scenario for teaching empathy in your classroom and you've been in character, I want you to upload that video to our class YouTube and submit it. And then you're done. Oh wait, don't forget to scan all of your images. If you've been doing them on paper, make sure that you photograph them and convert them to PDF, or you scan them. Or if you've been making them digitally, make sure they're converted to JPEG or PDF. I think they have to be PDF for TaskStream. And it's pretty easy to switch a JPEG to a PDF. So again, you need 15 total reflections for your critical task. And that is due at the 0 hour. Also wanted to note on the discussion board will open earlier this week and close earlier this week. So don't forget to post a discussion. The discussion board will open on Tuesday and it will close on Friday. Why am I shortening your week? Because YSU is shortening my week. I only have Sunday to complete grading your critical tasks and your discussion board for this week and your assignment for this week. So please do your discussions and your assignment quickly. They will automatically close on Friday. You won't be able to submit your assignment or your discussion after Friday. And that is for my sanity. I need enough time to look at your work. That's also why you don't have a make task this week and you only have 2 readings. So I'm trying to kind of balance this out so you have a little bit more time to get your work done sooner so that I can get your grades done on time and get them submitted on or hopefully before 8 a.m. on Monday. And then we're done. That's it. So, all right, good luck this week. I cannot wait to see your narrative scenarios. And don't forget that the written part of that is submitted to Blackboard. So you're submitting your 4 summaries of the narratives to Blackboard, and then you're just describing one narrative scenario and yourself in character for the video. So again, that's on Blackboard now, but I just want to make sure I mention it verbally as well if you're watching the video before you're looking through the course materials. Okay? Well, it's been great having you in class, and I wish you a great week. Remember, my office hours are Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m. I'll be live on Blackboard Collaborate. If you want to chat, pop in, ask questions. If you're having any kind of concerns about your work and you want to show me something, you can hold it up to the camera and let me look at it. Or if you just want to check in and make sure you're on the right track, please do. I've had people check in almost every week, and this week is no different. So if you need help this week, this is your last week to do that. And so I hope to see you on Wednesday, or I hope to hear from you if you have any questions or concerns. So good luck. Have a great week.